Good morning again. It's good to see you all. It's been a great church weekend for me. We've had a lot going on in the life of the church. There was a beautiful wedding yesterday, which seems a lovely way of entering into the story today in certain ways. We had a couple that was just, they were glorious, right? They clearly love each other so much. There was so much hope for the way that they'll pursue that love in their lives and grow in love all the days of their life. And really, that hope is such that as we witnessed the wedding yesterday, I think a lot of us were strengthened in our own way. There are words that we use in our prayers around weddings that cause some tension. We have words that we'll end up saying that we hope that this couple will live together in love now and forever. We also have words, and they're probably words that you're a little bit more familiar with, where we say things like, till death do we part. Right? Well, which one is it? Is it forever or is it until we die? That tension lives there without a lot of answers within the scope of our prayers that we say in church, and really without a lot of answers even when it comes to the Bible. Those questions are on the tongues of the Sadducees, a group, a sect of Judaism practicing in the first century who come to Jesus. But I got to tell you, they really didn't care very much about the answer. They weren't really going to Jesus hoping that he would give them the answer to their deep theological question about marriage. That's not how that was working. This takes place in a part of the gospel where there are all sorts of different groups coming to Jesus, and they're asking him trick questions, hoping to trap him. So you know some of the other ones probably, those of you who have been around church for a while. One of them pulls out a coin and says, whose head is on this coin? And it's Caesar's head. And they say, well, should we pay taxes or not? And Jesus says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's and give to God what is God's. And everybody's astonished, and yet there are still others who will ask questions. There are 7 who have married this one woman. In the afterlife, in the age to come, whose wife is she going to be? Whatever Jesus says in direct answer to that question is going to upset someone, I promise you. And their hope is that in the same way that the question about the coin would upset somebody bad enough that on a day that's going to come just a couple of chapters away from the one that we're in the Gospel of Luke, when they say, this one's a blasphemer, this one breaks all the religious rules, this one's teaching and promoting insurrection, and so on and so forth, that the people in the crowd will know that to be true because he gave the wrong answer one day. And they'll say, yeah, he's awful. Get rid of this guy. He's the worst. So Jesus does what he does and turns the tables on them. In fact, to help them understand that they don't really understand the way this resurrection thing works to begin with. But it's hard to know how this resurrection thing works to begin with. It's a pretty confusing concept. We've talked about it a lot up here before conceptually. The last time I talked about it, I tried to use my hands a lot to show you the way that it would work out. I'm not sure that got very far. I remember the way your faces looked. The more I used my hands trying to talk about the overlapping ages of the kingdom, it wasn't going so hot. So I thought I'd try again today, but I sat on PowerPoint early this morning and thought I'd create a little chart for you. Please excuse the color combination. That's not my strong suit, PowerPoint, as it turns out. So quickly, I threw this up together just so I could help you understand. From the perspective of the entirety of the Bible, there are 2 ages to consider. There's the age that has been defined by death and scarcity and pain and animosity, all the bad stuff. It's just easy enough to say all the bad stuff. That way we're all on the same page, right? And that has existed and stretched all the way back to the beginnings of creation, right? The story in the Bible about how that enters into or defines our present age is the story of Adam and Eve and the way that they sort of ushered that age in. So all the way through life, and including the life that you are living, we have a struggle with there not being enough. Or at least I don't believe there's enough, and so I'm going to act like there's not enough, which means I've got to keep stuff. Maybe there's not enough for both of us to share. Or there's so much difference in the world, and I've got to make sure that I protect those who are like me over and against those who are different. Got to build walls to divide. Right? All these different ways of interacting with a world that's defined by scarcity and by pain, but also by death And really the way that the Bible talks about it is that entire age is defined by death with a capital D. It's under the dominion of death, so to speak, so that all that stuff kind of gets wrapped up in that term. Well, Jesus promises an age where death no longer has any power, right? Jesus promises an age to come, and so do the prophets before him, really stretching all the way back to that same garden scene in the beginning. There will be a day where this isn't it anymore, and all that scarcity and all that pain and all that division and all that difference and all that stuff is gone. And that'll happen when God does that work, not when we do that work, because bad news, we're kind of the cause of some of the other stuff going on in this age. But we're also at war even within ourselves, caught between both sides. A quick scan of your life will demonstrate all that you need to know about how this works. There are moments of incredible bliss and transcendence and peace and joy that seem somehow beyond this world. There is a sense of love that overcomes death and the grave and adversity and scarcity and pain. That's sometimes we talk of that as if it is the kingdom of God breaking in on our lives. Well, the way we talk about it from a theological perspective, and pardon me for kind of being overly professorish today, is that we are caught in the middle of those two ages overlapping. The new age begins as soon as Jesus is here in his incarnation, in his being born, in his life and in his teaching and in his witness to the new age, in his death and in his conquering death in the resurrection. All of that is a sign of that which is to come, so to speak, of God's final victory over all that defines the age that is passing away. So that first kind of vertical line is what we would actually call the advent of Jesus, the coming of Jesus. Those of you who are church nerds will know we're about to move to the season of Advent, where we talk about not only the first time Jesus came, but also when God will finish God's redemptive acts, such that the age to come is the only age left. And that's really the second line up there. The Old Testament and even parts of the New Testament constantly refer to this as the day of the Lord, the day where God will finally fix everything that's broken about the world we live in right now. We are living right where that green oval is. In moments where it looks like things are being fixed, in moments where it seems like things are getting broken beyond belief, and we are constantly living in a tense place. Now, as it relates to our prayers for weddings, as it relates to a lot of our own marriages, as it relates to the question that the Sadducees bring up, the notion that this woman, who, by the way, is a human being who had a name and had value in and of herself, though she's treated like property within the context of the parable, all the circumstances around her 7 different marriages are irrelevant in the age to come, right? In the age to come, there is no pain of, or shame of, or lack of fertility. That's not, or infertility. That's not a thing that exists, a criteria that exists or a characteristic that exists in the age to come, because that's of the age of scarcity and pain and death. And so all those circumstances are gone, right? So Jesus really tries to frame, like, that's not it. All of those marriages that we've experienced that are less than perfect, and truly every marriage is, those parts that are less than perfect, well, that's not the way that relationship will be defined in the age to come, which is really good news if you're less than perfect like me. I love my wife dearly. We've been married for 12 and a half years. I hope that we will continue to love each other the way that the couple that got married yesterday loves each other. And I hope that we will increasingly love each other. But I know that this side of that second green line, there are going to be moments where we hurt each other, where our love is less than God's perfect design for us. But I believe that there will be a day where we love each other perfectly. And that is the age to come. Now, why are we talking about all this stuff to begin with? I know some of you are probably asking that question, especially those of you who are not married. and the analogy is just lost on you completely. If you're not married, consider another relationship that you have that you wish was perfect. A relationship with a child, a relationship with a friend, a relationship with a parent, a relationship with someone else in this world around you that's less than perfect right now, and you wish so badly it could be perfect. Perfectly just, perfectly loving, with perfect communion as the sort of definition for the way that you relate to one another. All of us have sort of relationships that fail to match up to that standard, right? Because we are living in this present age. Well, is your hope not that one day God would allow you and the person from whom maybe you are estranged to be in a relationship with each other that's not characterized by that pain anymore, or the adversity, or the jealousy, that you're just in perfect harmony with one another? Isn't that kind of your deep hope, even if you don't know how to get there? Even if it doesn't seem like a possibility in this age, and sometimes it's not? Well, if that's true, then you're expressing what's being expressed in this analogy about marriage, that our hope for the one day is that God will make that perfect. And what's true about Jesus' teaching on marriage is ultimately that in the afterlife, so to speak, in the age to come, you'll have that relationship that you want with everyone, not just with the person you're hopeful about. So again, think of that person that you wish so badly your relationship could be perfect. If that were fulfilled today, you would be thrilled, right? But then there would still be 1,000 more people that you would say, okay, well, now, God, let's you and I start working on this one because there's more. There will always be more. In the age to come, the more relates to love and justice and communion. That will be the definition of every relationship that you have. Now, some of you might object. Quickly, I would object and say, but my relationship with my wife is special, and I want that one to be special always. I think Jesus would say, it will be. This isn't subtractive. We're not going to diminish that relationship in any way. We're just going to make sure that all the other relationships that you have are also that. Does that make sense? It's additive, not subtractive. Your relationship, the one that you hope will be perfect, the one that you catch those glimpses of perfection in already, or the glimpses of glory in already, that's great. You'll have it with everybody. And here, I think, is the driving point. For Jesus, because he constantly witnessed to the age in which he really lived, the age to come, the one that he was ushering in, if you look at his life, he lived as if it was already so. As if he could have with everyone the relationship that God desires for everyone to have with each other and with God. So there was never someone who was less than worthy of his love. There was never someone outside the bounds of his love. There was never someone where his hope wasn't our relationship could be perfect and good and holy and show forth the glory of God. We as a church, I think, are called to live lives like that, right? We are called to live as if the second age is now, because it is. Because we know and we catch glimpses of it existing right now, the way in which we relate to each other, even when it's hard or nearly impossible, even when it seems like it's the gravity of the old age that's passing away pulling us back, we make a proclamation of God's goodness when we say, in spite of our difference, in defiance of our pain, in defiance of death, we proclaim resurrection, victory, peace, joy. In spite of the fact that we have a lot of evidence to the contrary in our relationships with one another that are so frequently wounded or broken, we make a witness out of our lives to what God is doing in this world. Or to put it another way, we make a proclamation about our hope. We will continue to live in a world characterized by suffering, by scarcity, by adversity, by division, until God is done with God's acts of redemption. And we don't know when that will be. But if we know what the goal is, we know how we might define our behavior now. And if the goal is perfect harmony with all of God's children, if the goal is to have a relationship with one another and with God that is defined by our greatest hope for what a relationship could possibly be, then we have work to do now to change the way we relate to each other, that our relating to each other might be a proclamation of that hope. I have no idea how difficult that might be in your life, but my hunch is, with those people for whom this represents tremendous struggle in my life, you might feel the same. That's an impossible task, Remington. How could I possibly do that? I truly don't know how you will do it, but I believe that it's the power of God working in you that will make it effective. It's the power of God working in you that will shine the light forward even when you are at a loss or at your end. And no matter how hard it might be, no matter how challenging or disruptive in our lives it might be to live lives according to the age to come instead of the age that we're in, it's our way of following Christ. The disciples who hear Jesus tell this to the Sadducees on this day are following him just a few more chapters to the cross and to an empty grave, where the light of the age to come will burst forth from an empty tomb. To follow Christ is to look for that light and to make it known in our lives. May God grant us the grace then, as a community, to be ones who live in defiance of the age that is passing away, that we might proclaim our hope for the age to come, and for God's love to be present with us always, each of us, all the time. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen.